if I could give one piece of advice to get to the heart of the problem, it's to ask this one question. We've
Yeah.
already been able to draw several conclusions from the data that we have that if we are doing the traditional, like cube style, or as we call them, WTF diamonds, if we're doing that kind of outreach, wearing the mask definitely makes a difference. A global catastrophe. It's just the worst thing. I don't have words to describe how bad it is.
So my guest today is James, who I met last year in an animal rights conference. Very kind and warm person. One of those persons who you want to be around, you want to spend time with. And James is the founder and executive director of one of the most distinguished animal rights organizations in the world, Activism WTF. James, welcome to Uncaged by VeganFTA, and I hope you are doing well today.
Thank you, my friend Shivam. It's so great to see you, and I'm honoured to be invited on your podcast. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to talking to you.
Yeah, yeah, and the like everyone knows about Activism WTF, but today we are getting an opportunity to meet someone who's the brains behind the organization. So, James, my first question to you is that before Activism WTF as well, you have worked with various organizations in different capacities. Why did you feel the need to start Activism WTF?
Uh, yeah. First of all, I'll just address. I don't know about brains behind behind the organization. I think I have an amazing team. I feel like I stand on the shoulders of giants, honestly. But I'm definitely the
Yeah.
person responsible for recruiting most of them.
No,
So that's my glory that I get to hold on to.
no.
So
I can say this with certainty to everyone. James is too kind to acknowledge this and this because I know him in person. But trust me, some of his ideas are mind blowing, and of course, we will go through them. Yeah. So, James, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Shivam. You are too kind. You are too kind. Yeah, so We the Free is the full name of the organization for anyone that might not be familiar with us, or WTF for short, because we like the anagram WTF, which of course is most people's reaction the first time they see the truth of what happens to animals in farms and slaughterhouses. So WTF for short, We the Free is the full name of the organization because we believe that those of us that are free, have a duty to use our freedom to advocate for those that have had their freedom unjustly stolen from them. Of course, I'm talking about animals in farms and slaughterhouses that are the victims of human oppression in our food system. To go back to your question, are you referring to like what I did before We the Free or before activism?
No, I'm asking that you have worked with other organization, animal rights organization as well, right? So
Yeah,
essentially,
yeah.
why did you feel that there was a need for another organization, and why did WTF start?
Oh, yeah, yeah, great question. Thank you. So, I've volunteered with a whole host of different organizations, including the Save Movement, including Anonymous for the Voiceless, including Earthlings Experiences. I've been involved in pressure
Mm,
campaigns. I've stood outside circuses with megaphones and signs, like campaigning for them to close down. I've done investigations in farms and slaughterhouses. I've done many different. I think I took part in the one and only Direct Action Everywhere event that happened in my city.
mm,
Lots of different things. And
mm,
actually, a common misconception, people maybe think that I started We the Free because I hate those different organizations, so I've got something against them. And that's absolutely not the case. We the Free basically came about because we wanted to try something slightly different to what already existed. And those other organizations, they are all very good at saying, this is what we do. If you want to try something different, that's completely fine. And at the time, I was actually an organizer for Anonymous for the Voiceless in my local city. And we were doing the Cube of Truth maybe twice a month, something like that. And we wanted to try something a little bit different. And we wanted to try showing sanctuary footage or just slightly changing the event format. And AV, credit to them, they said, this is our format. This is what we like to do. We've put a lot of time and effort into uh, trying to min max our setup to be exactly how we think is the best way. If you want to try something different, then you can do that, but just under a different banner. So that's basically what we did. Um,
mm,
we when we first thought about starting a new organization, me and a group of peers had actually been kind of traveling around and going to a lot of activism events.
Mm,
Myself in the United Kingdom, other activists in different countries, and we basically noticed a bit of a gap in the movement, and
mm,
or we thought we did, but we decided we wanted to test it. So we ran an animal rights survey, and this is going back maybe 5 years now, and it's probably in fact, I'm almost certain it's the largest animal rights survey of its kind that's ever been conducted.
wow.
And
How
1,100
many people
vegans
were
from around
involved?
the world, 1,100 activists took part in
Wow.
this survey. And it asks all sorts of questions like, what kind of actions do you do? Are you a volunteer? Are you an organizer? Are you a leader of an organization? To what kind of trainings do you receive? And how sure are you that you're making an impact? And is there, have you had interactions with infighting, or have you experienced burnout? And
Mm,
basically the findings of the survey were a huge wake-up call that there were some real problems in the movement, and this could be seen quite easily. If you remember going back to like 2018, there was literally like animal rights groups like imploding left, right, and center from like infighting, toxic communication, burnout, people just disappearing from the movement, people becoming like ex-vegan influencers, things like that. Well, maybe 2019, 2018, I refer to as the golden age of street activism, in that everybody was getting involved. Things were exploding everywhere. It felt amazing. There was so much excitement. And then
mm,
in 2019, basically that started to implode, and lots of teams just ceased to exist. And
mm,
the survey confirmed our fears. Some real problems in the movement, that a huge amount of people stop their activism or significantly reduce their activism after only 2 years in the movement. The reasons that they told us was because of infighting, toxic
mm,
communication, burnout, or a perceived lack of impact, like not knowing if they were making a difference, which makes sense, right? If you imagine you're going out into your local city centre every single weekend to advocate for animals, and you're being met with so much indifference from people in the street, or maybe you're getting pushback from activists in your own community, and you feel like you're not making a difference. After a couple of years, that's going to get disheartening, and lots of people would give up. So yeah, that was a huge problem. People reported a lack of professional trainings in the movement, not really having the right support systems in place, burning out,
mm,
leaving the movement because of that. And
mm,
also, people just didn't really know exactly like which direction to focus their energy to have the biggest impact. So I guess
mm,
that the three biggest problems were lack of impact or knowledge of what impact we were having, lack of
mm,
training, and a lack of
mm,
resilient communities. Does that kind of
mm.
answer the question? So we use that
Yes,
survey as a blueprint to create We the Free.
interesting, interesting. And We the Free specifically focuses on measuring the impact, right? So if we can zoom in on the measurement of impact and how We the Free does that, and any advice that you have for anyone else who's watching this.
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Shivam. So first of all, some people think that when we talk about collecting, data and measuring our impact, that this is an ego thing, that we just want to be able to show off, like, oh, I'm this amazing activist because I've made 10 people go vegan this month, or something like that. And
Mm,
it's not about that at all. It's about being as effective and impactful as possible, because we need to know that we are using our resources in the most effective way.
mm,
As a movement, we have extremely finite resources in terms of funding, in terms of volunteers, in terms of energy levels, in terms of,
time.
we can only do one kind of activism at the time at once, right? Well, that's not exactly true, but at a specific moment in time, it's hard to be doing more than one type of activism. Maybe on Saturday I can go to a vigil with the Save Movement. On Sunday I can do a We the Free event. The following day, plant-based treaty. You know.
Hmm.
So, sorry, were you about to ask something there? Should I continue?
No, no, please continue. No, you're talking about lack of resources. I was saying that another important factor, another important resource that we have limited is time. There's only so much that we can
I'm
do, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. So as a movement, I think we have a responsibility. Like, let's just be real for a minute. What's happening to the animals is
mm,
a global catastrophe. It's just the worst thing. I don't have words to describe how bad it is, what's happening to animals. It's the biggest social justice issue of our time. Like, by any
mm,
measure imaginable, what's happening to animals is just
mm,
completely unacceptable. And we owe them, we have a moral duty, I think, to be as effective, as impactful as possible. And if we are not collecting any data on the effectiveness of our activism, then I think we are
mm,
failing them. So
mm,
We the Free aims to tackle this in a few different ways. One is by being guided by the research on what is effective in the first place. So using research from organizations like Faunalytics and other similar organizations that actually do research,
mm,
following guidance from organizations that are looking at like narrative research, like Animal Think
mm,
Tank and similar organizations. So first of
mm,
all, putting that into practice and being guided by that when designing our strategies, when designing our campaigns, our interventions. And secondly, actually training activists to be able to have impactful conversations using the best social science research we have available to design the
mm,
training. So we do that. We have the Inspiring Behavior Change workshop that we deliver free of charge on to activists on Zoom remotely twice a month, every month, pretty much, at least on average. And we believe that's the most effective and data driven training on how to have impactful conversations about activism. And the third, and perhaps most unique, is a website that we built called MyStats. So that's www.mystats.wtf. And it's basically a data and analytics dashboard for activists to use to understand their impact. So when I'm talking to somebody on the street, I want to try and convince them to go vegan. And I normally want to do that by accompanying the conversation I have with sharing resources with them, maybe a card with a list of links to a mentor program or a documentary that I think is really impactful. We do that, but we always refer people to a website, www.3movies.wtf. That's our website, and it's basically a library of vegan resources. And it's
mm,
got documentaries, it's got websites, apps, books, recipes, all different kinds of resources that people will need to help them go vegan. And
mm,
that's like linked with the activism dashboard. So when I have that conversation with somebody in the street, I give them a card that links to 3movies.wtf, and I add my own
mm,
little referral code, just my name, James, and I give people
mm,
the card and say, when you go to that website, it will ask you for a referral code. Enter my name, James, or maybe they don't even need to do that. They scan a QR code and it automatically handles the referral part.
mm,
And when they do that, then the website tracks every action they take. If they sign up to a mentor program, if they watch a documentary, um,
mm,
if they like go to look at a book, it keeps track of that. So I can then use my activism dashboard and look at the impact of my activism. So I know if I've gone to 100 events over the last year and I've given out 1,000 of these cards that refer people to the website, maybe 300 people have gone to that website. So I know I've got a 30% inspiration rate from the amount of cards that I give out to the amount of people that check out the website. And then maybe 60% of them actually watched a documentary, or 30% of them signed up to a mentor program. Obviously, it's
mm,
different for everyone. I can use that data to decide how to spend my time. Maybe I go to the We the Free 3 Minute Movie Challenge and find that that's the most effective use of my time, because for every 10 conversations I have, 5 people go to the website. Or
mm,
maybe for somebody like you, Shivam, you make absolutely dope animal rights content that reaches, you spend that same 3 hours, instead of spending 3 hours at a street outreach event, you spend that same 3 hours creating animal rights content, put that on the internet to be viewed by 20,000 people on Instagram, and you reach
mm,
way more people than the 5 people that I might reach with the street activism. So for you, the most effective use of your time is making that content to reach people online.
mm,
That's just one example. Obviously, it could be different training types that we use, different styles of communication. It could be different footage that we show, different event formats. You can use it to make comparisons. So, at an individual level, it might be about our training approach, how we talk to people. At a team level, it might be about the footage that we show or the type of event that we run. At an
mm.
organizational level, we've
Yeah.
already been able to draw several conclusions from the data that we have, that if we are doing the traditional, like cube style, or as we call them, WTF diamonds, if we're doing that kind of outreach, wearing the mask definitely makes a difference. We have more conversations, we have better feedback. So you should wear a mask. We also found that the movie challenges seem to have much better and more conversations than doing the diamond. So we now almost exclusively recommend the movie challenge. If something changes in the future and we find another event format's more effective, then we'll recommend that to our activists. So we are being guided by that data to be as effective as we can.
Interesting. So essentially, the application that you have developed, you are trying to measure the call to action, how much of how many people have actually taken different types of call to action, and you use the term inspiration rate, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think to some people this might sound like a bit technical or a bit scary or a bit ego driven or something like that. I just really want to reiterate that this is not about ego. And actually, if you think for a second, the meat industries, the animal products, the meat industry selling these animal products, this animal flesh, they absolutely use data and analytics for measuring the conversion rates of their adverts, where they're celebrating the latest McDonald's burger or Burger King product or Tyson Foods
Hmm.
product or whatever. They use data and analytics to track their inspiration rate or their conversion rates or whatever you want to call it. We're just
Yeah.
doing the same thing.
I think it's outrageously, pardon me for the use of word, but outrageously stupid to think that this is being done for the sake of ego. Trying to be efficient and effective by using analytics, statistics is something that everyone should do in their respective capacities. Like, even if you're having, I tell this in some of my training sessions as well. Please be mindful of your time, and always make a note, like a very simple thing, that this weekend you talk to 5 people in 2 hours, and next weekend you talk to 7 people, and why is that increment there, and how was the the quality of the discussion. Please try to track this. If you don't track it, then how will improve, right? Even the most basic of the things, you can improve only if you have a baseline, right? And I think that is something that you and your team has done so well for other activists, and we'll put the links, of course, and also we'll share the details on the screen as well for people to visit and check it out. And I am pretty sure that you are aware of it, James, or maybe people within your team, they of course know this, that uh, we are going to have our first WTF event in my city very soon. We recently secured the permission, so I'll be a part of that, and definitely looking forward to that.
That's amazing. Are you doing the 3 minute movie challenge?
I'm not sure if we are doing the 3 minute movie challenge, or what you said, that the
The diamond.
diamond. Yeah, I just know that which location is it, and where we got the permission from the authorities. So yeah, the organizers, they are deciding it, but yeah, I've told them that whenever you do this, please count me in. I'll be definitely there.
Amazing. And maybe I should just explain for anybody that might not be familiar with the 3 minute movie challenge what that
Yes,
actually
please.
is.
Yes, please do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, so the for anyone that's not already aware, the WTF 3 minute movie challenge is basically our most common type of street activism event format. Imagine that you are walking down the street and you're just going about your day, you're shopping in the town center, whatever, and you just see somebody holding up a sign, and on the sign it says movie challenge, watch 3 minutes and win a prize. And you see a table with some screens set up, chairs in front of the screens, headphones, and somebody guides you to take a seat, put the headphones on, and press play on the laptop in front of you. And you are shown the most. There's a graphic warning at the beginning, and that shows for 3 or 4 seconds, and then it gets into a 3 minute documentary, and it's 3 minutes of the most brutal and harrowing animal rights footage you've ever seen. Everything is legal standard practice, but it's extremely difficult to watch. And by the end of that 3 minutes, you are shaken, disturbed, but maybe also inspired to help these animals. And lots of people, when they watch this, they're crying and they turn to the person next to them and say, I had no idea it was this bad. How can we help these animals? And instead of it being like a protest and like a conflict where people are like arguing about, oh, this is necessary, the conversation completely changes dynamics from events we've done in the past, where most, like many people who watch this footage, they want to know, how can I help these animals? Like, what can I do? And we can come in almost more of a counselor than like an activist, and just say, thank you for watching that. I know that was really hard. First of all, I just want to check in with you. Are you okay? Great. Okay. Like, you mentioned you want to help these animals. Like, what do you think we can do to help these animals? And maybe then progressing it towards veganism. Like, would that be too hard for you to go vegan? Oh, you mentioned that you're worried you would get enough protein. Like, let's talk about that. And the conversation completely changes dynamic. And then at the end of the conversation, you give them an incentive, like a prize, maybe a cupcake, a donut, a cookie.
Mm.
Maybe you've partnered with a local vegan business to give away some like vegan
Mm.
burgers, kind of snack, something like that. And they have maybe their first ever experience with delicious vegan food, coming
Mm.
immediately off the back of an inspiring conversation about like helping animals and going vegan. So it's
Mm.
incredibly effective event format that we recommend to everyone. So if there's not already a 3 minute, if there is not already a We the Free team in your local city, reach out to us and ask us to help you to start one. There only needs to be one person. If there's two people, that's even better, and we can help you
Mm.
with everything from recruiting more volunteers to getting the equipment. We can help you to buy the equipment. We can help you with training, everything. And hopefully, like Shivam finds when he goes to his first event in his city, you'll find that you're having incredibly impactful conversations with people and that they want to go vegan at the end. And that will feel great. You'll feel like you are helping animals. And you
Yes,
will do.
yes. Yes, yes. And also, for the folks who are listening to this, please check out the WTF website. It's one of the cleanest websites in the animal rights space, because I'm working on VeganFTA's website, revamping it. So I took a lot of inspiration from WTF website, and it's one of the cleanest website, and you can very easily apply for being an organizer in your city.
Thank you.
And James, I know that you are very optimistic about street activism. I have discussed this with you. Would you like to share why that is the case?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Thank you, Shivam. That's something I'm very passionate about. So, I guess there's kind of a misconception in the animal rights movement that when people are doing street activism, that there's not much strategy to it. Our only intention is to outreach our way to a vegan future. And what I mean by that is, if we can only outreach enough people, if we can make enough people go vegan, then we will automatically get a vegan world. And there's a bit of a problem with that theory of how that will change the world, in that it's very hard to outreach enough people, even just to overcome how many new humans are born every day and the rate at which the global kind of population is rising. And that kind of math doesn't track that meat consumption does continue to rise year by year. It's going to be very hard for us to outreach our way to a vegan future. Um, Fortunately, like, I'm not saying there's no hope. Like, I am very hopeful, and I believe that street outreach is a necessary part of how we achieve a vegan world and how we tip the needle, how we accelerate that dramatically. So, first of all, street outreach is one of the most one of the most accessible. Street outreach is one of the most accessible entryways into the world of activism. Most activists I know, I'm talking like 99% of the activists that I know, and everybody I know is an activist. 99% of the activists that I know got started with street activism. So their very first ever event they went to was a Cube of Truth, a We the Free Diamond, a movie challenge, a Save Movement Vigil, DXE event, whatever. They were going out into the street and trying to promote veganism in some way. We call it a gateway drug into the world of activism, because so many people, it's a way that people come in, they get confidence, they find community, and community is the most important thing that you need as a new vegan activist. You need to feel that you're not fighting against these huge industries completely on your own. So you join a community, you build friends, you build unions, and then a couple of you get together and go and investigate your local farm, record some footage that might get that farm shut down, liberate some animals, and then get involved in corporate campaigns and pressure campaigns and whatever else. And it's just one tool in your tool belt, your whole arsenal of creating this change. I guess the other important thing is that our intention isn't just to create enough vegans that the world becomes vegan because we outreach everyone. I've already explained that the math is not on our side for that. But it's not, obviously, that is a part of it. When we talk to people and we hopefully inspire them to go vegan, we are creating new vegans. And those new vegans, they do vote for a vegan future in the obvious way that everyone thinks of initially through supply and demand. So they vote as a consumer. Every time they go and buy their shopping in the grocery store, instead of reaching for the cow's milk, they reach for the soy milk, the almond milk, the oat milk. Instead of reaching for that minced beef, maybe they reach for a vegan minced beef. Like, they are voting against animal products by reducing the demand for those and voting for the plant-based options by voting for that with their dollars. People generally understand this concept. And by doing that, they hopefully increase the supply. That this is how supply and demand works, the basics of economics. So that's one thing. They vote as a consumer, but they also vote as a citizen. They can vote for governments and parties which hopefully have animal friendly bills. Or in America, for instance, there's a very different legal system. They can vote for ballot initiatives to get a slaughterhouse banned in the city of Denver. That there was a huge campaign recently to do that, and they didn't quite manage it, but there's some really exciting things happening there. Or another thing that's really exciting for me is they can vote as members of institutions. That's the third one. And there's some really exciting work happening here from my friends at Animal Rising, specifically in the plant-based unis campaign, like a sister organization, and plant-based council, sister organization. And what they do is they work with like students to basically get votes passed to transition their entire university and all their purchasing to become completely plant-based. So as a member of that institution, you can vote for a change towards a vegan future. One more example of that I think is really powerful is I think it's called the Hayek Hospital in Lebanon, that transitioned to being the world's first fully vegan hospital.
Middle East Vegan Society.
Yeah, Middle East Vegan Society did some amazing work on that. And I think you
Yeah,
had Seb as a guest on here recently, and maybe he
yeah,
spoke about that.
yeah.
Presumably that happened because the director of that hospital is a passionate vegan. So
Hmm.
I guess what I'm saying is, if we can create vegans that permeate all throughout society, some of them will be in positions where they can create lasting change for animals by making decisions that will help animals. So it's a ripple effect. We need to keep plugging away at it. We need to create enough vegans throughout society that some of them are in powerful positions. And street outreach is an important part of that. So yeah, I will give up on street outreach, even though I'm finding that some of our online activism is really, really effective right now, potentially way more impactful than our street activism. But I will never give up on street activism because it builds community. It's an entry point. It recruits new activists. It's honestly, street activism is a recruitment tool for the whole movement. I speak to so many people in other organizations, and they all tell me, James, we are really struggling to recruit volunteers right now. And I think, really, that's like one thing that we aren't struggling with. Like, it's quite, organic for us to grow and grow and grow every year and bring in more people all over the world and start new teams in different cities.
Yeah,
We can funnel those
exactly.
people towards different kind of organizations, different theories of change, different things. I guess the other thing I failed to mention there is it's not just about creating new vegans. And I just hinted on it a little bit, but we really view We the Free's role in the movement as a lot deeper than just trying to create new vegans, that we are movement builders. So I just
Hmm.
touched on there that we are a recruitment tool for the whole movement. We can grow the whole movement. And this is what
Hmm.
we are seeing. We are seeing like people come into We the Free as their first ever type of activism. And then this year they led their local NARD, National Animal Rights Day. Um, they are starting their own campaigns. They are doing art installations with Speciesism.wtf. They are starting chapters for other organizations in their cities and working closely together with We the Free. They are
Hmm.
going and doing investigations and liberations and different things. So we are growing the movement. Secondly, we are building power in the movement by providing professional level trainings to activists on leadership skills, on communication, on sustainable activism, resilience, conflict resolution, all these different kind of skills in the movement. Uh, Third, we are building movement health. So we actually put a huge amount of time into resolving conflicts and trying to create a more resilient and healthy community.
mm.
And maybe that's something we can talk about a bit later,
Yeah,
because conflict
we'll.
movement is a real
Yeah.
hot topic. Maybe that
Yes.
deserves its own kind of conversation. And the fourth and
Yes.
final part of the puzzle is something I call movement mobility. And what I mean by that is, I just mentioned that We the Free recruits these volunteers. We can then create pathways to different organizations so that
Mm,
we can easily get involved wherever we are needed at the moment. You mentioned we don't have that much time as a movement, that much resources. We need to be strategic with it. And I think there are times where, as a movement, we need to be strategic. We need to come together and pivot around what is called, in social change theory, what is
mm,
called trigger events. So, one example of this in the Black Lives Matter movement, when George Floyd was, brutally killed, that was a
yeah.
huge trigger moment for the racial justice movement, right? And
Mm,
people were sat having conversations with their family around the dinner table all around the world, talking about what they'd seen on that footage and how it made them feel, and like having conversations that had never happened again, never
mm,
happened before, and maybe not even happened since, about like what kind of world do we want to create moving forwards? Like, what do I want to stand for as a person, as a society, as an organization, as a group of people, and how do we
mm,
get there? And every social justice movement in history has had these like trigger events. And
mm,
somebody once asked me, what do you think the animal rights movement's big trigger moment will be? The big George Floyd moment. And my answer was, I have no idea what that is, but I know we need to be ready when that happens. We need to be ready as
mm,
a movement to pivot and mobilize around this
mm,
important moment, and rally together to achieve lasting change for animals. So
mm,
movement mobility, like We the Free can recruit all this huge, we are building this huge global network of animal activists. And
mm,
if we have good kind of communication with our broad network, and we can create these easy pathways between different organizations, different types of activism, if we have like working collaborations with different organizations, then it becomes a lot easier for us to be mobile, to have that mobility to mobilize and pivot around these moments. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it does. And I would like to add one more thing with regard to street activism. I think you covered most of the points very eloquently. Another thing which I have felt personally is that street activism is also one of the best ways to improve oneself as an activist, because you get ample of opportunities to talk to neutral people, sometimes strollers and anti-vegans as well, and it is free practice that you are getting. And
Oh
if
my
you're ready
God, yeah.
for that, yeah, and if you're ready for that, like someday maybe if you grow in stature as an activist, you might get invited to a mainstream podcast or some place where you'll have to present the movement in a very eloquent manner. The like whatever arguments are being presented to you, are you well crafted with your words or not? And that's going to make a huge difference, and street activism presents you with that opportunity.
Absolutely. I could not agree more, Shivam. I'm so glad you said that. I
Yeah.
really feel like when I first became a vegan, I practically danced up to my friends and family to tell them like, oh, this amazing thing's happened. I've gone vegan, and you can go vegan, and you can go vegan, and together we can save the world and help all the animals. And when I was met
Yeah.
with such sheer indifference and hostility, it
Hmm.
really created so much conflict in my life between some of the people I loved the most and I care the most about. And
Hmm.
it almost irreparably damaged those relationships I had with friends and family.
Hmm.
And that's because I didn't know how to have those conversations, right?
Hmm.
And what I found is, after just a few months of regularly going to a street outreach event, I was so much better at having those conversations in a calm and composed manner where I could get my points across without becoming too emotional, without becoming too defensive, and I could have
Mm.
better conversations with my friends, with my family members about why I'm vegan and why they should be as well. So yeah, even if it's just
Yeah.
to have better conversations with your friends and family, you will find that it's much easier to talk to complete strangers in the street than it is to talk
Yeah.
to a member of your family about why they should be vegan. And it's a
Yeah.
perfect way to practice and hone your skills.
Yeah. Yes. And there's another benefit. I don't know if you can relate to this or not. With street activism, I also learned to detach myself from the outcome. Like, even if the conversation has gone bad, maybe because of lack in my skill set or whatever reason, I know that that's a neutral person. There's no like huge repercussion. I can move on to the next person and then reset and move on to the next person and have a better conversation and stuff like that and improve myself and see why that did not work out,
Yeah.
so on and so forth. So I have learned to detach from the outcome because of street activism.
Yeah, and even with you and I sat here telling people listening to this, like, detach yourself from the outcome. Ultimately, it's not your responsibility for that person to go vegan. All you can do is present them with the information, and it's their responsibility to do the right thing with that information. We can tell them
Mm.
that, but I think most people still need to learn that the hard way, because you will hear that and say, yeah, yeah, okay. And you go into your first street outreach conversation, and you really want that person to go vegan, and maybe your first conversation doesn't go quite as well as it could have done. Maybe you make a few mistakes, maybe they're just really hostile and they push back on you. Ultimately, you will feel like you've really failed the animals if you don't do a good job and that person doesn't commit to going vegan on the spot.
Mm.
And honestly, that's not true. By you being
Mm.
there, by you getting out of bed, walking into your local city centre, having conversations with strangers in the street about veganism, about animal rights, I'm sure that's not your favorite way of how you could spend that day.
Mm.
If we already had a vegan world and you didn't have to do that, then you have other options you'd want to do, right? But by you
Mm.
turning up and defending
Mm.
animals and being there and being a voice for them, that's really worthwhile. That's very, very important. You are doing
Yeah.
enough. It's not your, like, obviously it's good to be informed. It's good to hone your craft. It's good to invest in yourself as an activist and try to improve your ability to create more vegans. It's good to use some of that evidence, follow the research, do the trainings, and make yourself as good as possible. But please
Yeah.
don't let that be the reason that you don't even go out there in the street, because you're worried that they might not go vegan because you're not Earthling Ed or you're not Joey Carb Strong. So maybe you'll do the animals a disservice by not being there. Like, that's not the case. You do the animals a great service by showing up. So please show up.
Yes, yes. And another thing that you mentioned, I would like to present that in a slightly different manner. That sometimes we talk to individuals, and let's say we talk to hundreds of them, and one person becomes a vegan, or at least because of us, or at least we are the triggering point for that one person. Now, this one person can also be a person of leverage. Like you rightly said, that example that you gave, the director of that specific hospital was a vegan, and then that person, because of their position, had so much of power in that institution. Likewise, you never know who will become what, right? Sometimes I was just talking to an activist, a rapper. I'm assuming you may know him, Feldy. Have you heard of Feldy?
I know Felder. Yeah, yeah. I don't know him personally, but I'm a fan. Yeah.
I was talking to Feldy, and today he is such a powerful voice, especially with his rap music. And he became vegan because of a street outreach. It was an AV event, if I remember correctly. And one of the activists just talked to him, and he became vegan. Like, the idea of veganism resonated with him, and he took a stance in his head that very night. And in coming days, and in the following days, he became a vegan. And that is a point of leverage, right? Now he is a growing musician, and I'm sure that he'll become much, much bigger. And imagine the kind of impact that this one person has. And now imagine the role of that street activist who made Feldy go vegan.
Yeah, exactly. It's the like the embedded impact of that person. Like, you might go to street outreach events for the next year and only make one person go vegan, but that one person creates a new alt protein startup that revolutionizes,
Yeah.
you know, revolutionizes the market in a whole area of the world or something. They might create the next Beyond Meat. They might create a new organization like We the Free. Like you can't
Yeah.
you can't limit your thinking to just like, oh, I only made like one person go vegan this year or something like
Yeah.
that. Just get out
Yeah.
there and try. Get out there, make
Exactly.
mistakes, and try.
Yeah. And anyone who is not as optimistic as James and I are on street activism and in general bottom up approach, a very pertinent point to note is that even for a top down approach or a policy level changes, you still need to have enough number of individuals to vote for that kind of a change, to affect that kind of a change.
So actually, I believe very strongly that we need all different approaches in the movement.
Hmm.
We need street activism. We need the top-down approach. We need institutional change and corporate outreach. We need investigations. We
Hmm.
even need people doing the like more like, I don't want to use the word extreme, but for lack of a better word, like extreme attention grabbing things. We need them. That I probably don't have
Disruptive
enough time
activism.
today to get in. Yeah, disruptions. We probably don't have enough time today to get into like all the different like social science and research that supports all these different interventions.
Mhm.
But yeah, we need all of them. We are a social movement ecology, and we have like inside game, like the people doing the political stuff, the lobbying. We have outside game people doing the personal transformation. We have even
Hmm.
organizations, playing consumerism and building the alt proteins. We cannot have a vegan world without some combination of
Yeah.
all of those. And
Yeah.
social, we can say like, oh, we only need a top-down approach. We need the governments to make change. We need policies and legislation to make that change for people. But actually, if you look at past social justice movements, the government always tends to lag like a couple of decades behind what the actual society wants. So we can't have
Hmm.
that without this. We need different approaches. So
Absolutely. I think it's
basically,
so.
my advice to somebody in the movement would be absolutely get involved in street outreach, and
Hmm.
also try to find where the
What's your
intersection
strength?
of three things, like what the movement needs, what you're really skilled at, and what you're passionate about.
Hmm.
Like what, the
Well,
things that you're good at, you're passionate about, and what the movement needs. And that might be video editing, that might be human resources, that might be finance and accounting, that might be investigations. It could
hmm.
be any one of the whole amount of things. And you can funnel that into supporting an animal rights organization or starting your own and create
Yeah.
change for animals.
Yeah. So that's skill, passion, and what the movement needs. It's this is like an ikigai version of animal rights.
Yeah. Are you noticing I've got the Ikigai book behind me there?
Yeah. There's another element. So I had this question for a bit later, but now since we are discussing this and ikigai, there's another element. Uh, in addition to these three things, the fourth element could also be how can a person sustain financially or make a decent living. So on that note, I'll ask this question now: what can an individual do to get involved with the movement so that it becomes their livelihood as well? What are your top suggestions for them?
Um, First of all, I want you to think about how you can add value to the movement. And
Hmm.
if you do something extremely well, you will create your own opportunities. And I mean that that sounds empty. I promise it's not. I'll give one example. Um, there's a guy on social, he's a 22-year-old activist from France, and he created a social media account called Meat Sucks, and this account single handedly drives 2 million people to our website every single month to watch the 3 minute movie challenge, because he's so good at creating this, like, uh, this content which just is thought provoking and engaging. And people go to his bio, click on his link tree, and click on the 3 minute movie challenge in his link tree. And he's so prolific at that that, of course, we reached out to him and offered him a job. And he now works for the We the Free team on our media team. And he continues to drive like huge amounts of people to watch the 3 minute movie challenge. So that this is now like probably our most impactful thing that we're doing in terms of we have after people watch that 3 minute movie challenge on our website, we have a little survey that pops up, and we've only been running that survey for a month. And we ask people, how did that 3 minute documentary affect you? This made me want to go vegan. This made me want to reduce my consumption. This made me want to do more research, or none of the above. And about 1,000 people every day are saying they want to go vegan because of that documentary. That's just mind blowing to
Wow.
me. And that's predominantly because of this one person who's just a social media genius. So
Yeah.
obviously, that's kind of an extreme example, but anything that you are extremely good at has an opportunity to find you a way of sustaining yourself and being impactful in activism. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, like, obviously reach out to like animal activism careers, and go on their job board and like look for positions they have. You'd be surprised what positions are out there in the movement that can sustain your activism. The third
Hmm.
is, until you do that, as much as it might suck for me to say this, like, find a high paying job, something where you can freelance and do it on the side until you scale your activism up. I was really fortunate that I managed to get just enough funding for me to take a very meager salary from We the Free when we first started, a very modest salary, and I moved to a third world country to make that salary last like long enough for me to be able to live.
Hmm.
And I managed to quit my past career, take a huge pay cut, and sustain myself full time on We the Free. But if I didn't, I had so many plans in place that I've decided I want to commit myself to animal rights. I said at the start, this is the most pressing social justice issue of our time. I loved
Hmm.
working in social care. That was something I was very passionate about. I loved helping people with intellectual disabilities, creating a better life for them. I was very passionate about that, but I felt morally obliged to sacrifice that career that I grieve for. I missed that. I loved that job, but I sacrificed that. I threw that at my career of 10 years and said, I'm going to throw everything I've got into something I, I really believe in, but I'm not sure if I can make it a success, and like start We the Free. And I'm really, really grateful I managed to make it work, but it was very, very hard, extremely challenging. The past 5 years have definitely not been a cakewalk. So yeah, be really good at what you do and dedicate yourself to it. And of course, use all of the resources available, like the animal activism careers job boards and vegan job boards and things like that.
Love that
Anything
answer
you want to add,
because
Shivam? Because you've made it happen as well, right?
yeah, I've made it happen as well. And I love your answer because you said that if you have the skill set and the passion, you will find a way in the movement to sustain yourself. Unfortunately, we do not have a formal path for people to make a career in this space. Of course, you talked about the job boards where people can find uh, a job which is suitable to them. Of course, they can explore that. But that being said, if it's still not as defined, let's say, as someone who's from an engineering background or from an MBA background, you know
Hmm.
that these are the companies. This is where you go ahead and do all of that, right? And in that, you mentioned this one thing which I keep telling people as well, that first and foremost, of course, if you want to work for the movement, it has to come from a place of extreme passion because you want this change to happen. And
Hmm.
one of the best ways to go about it is not to quit your existing job or your whatever you are doing that is helping you support you financially. Continue that, and in addition to that, find time to do your stuff. That can be volunteering with an organization, that can be creating content, so on and so forth. And in my stories like that, me and my partner, we used to create content with our jobs, and that just kept growing. And that was nothing but, so I love working with camera and making stories, digital stories, and editing videos and stuff like that. And I was also working my full-time job with a corporate firm where I was working as a senior project manager. So a lot of the things over there had to do with communications and working with various stakeholders and keeping so many people happy and yet getting the outcome done. So I kind of just combined all of this and was doing activism on the side, social
Yeah.
media activism, right? And that just took, and I continued that for almost 4 years before it actually kind of took off. 3 years at least before it took off, before it got noticed. And because of that, people from FTA, vegan FTA, they reached out for possible collaborations, and then they came to know about my background, that I'm from MB operations background, and then they offered me a job that time. But I wasn't really sure, because I support my family and stuff, so I wasn't sure. So I was doing freelancing with them
Mhm.
in parallel, and then things kind of worked out and it just happened. And this is something which just happened for me because of my unique skill set and my
Mhm.
background. And that is very relevant to what you are saying, right? That as an individual, if you can find a way to contribute, then you will find your way into the movement. But unfortunately, there's no defined, or there are only limited number of defined ways in which you
Yeah.
can. Yeah, so that's
So
the thing. It's
I feel I feel like I need to add a strong caveat to what I said before, because it perhaps sounded a little bit out of touch. If when I say, if you believe in it hard enough, like it will happen. Like if you create enough impact, it will happen. And honestly, the caveat is it might not, because just real talk for a minute. The movement, we already mentioned multiple times, the movement has extremely finite resources in terms of like funding that comes into the movement. And I can think of 20 people off the top of my head right now that if I could offer a job to them, I would do it today, because
mm,
I know that they're doing great work. But obviously, like we the free, also we have to raise funds, we have to do fundraising, we have to apply for grants, we have to reach out, like build relationships with donors that believe in our mission, and then funnel that money into hiring people. And we can't hire everyone. So first of all, like you have to do what you just mentioned, Shivam, like be extremely good at what you did. More than 90% of the people that work as contractors with We the Free or employees with We the Free started out as volunteers.
mm,
Um, and basically, we as a movement have a responsibility with the funds that we raise, with the grants that we apply for, the donations that we receive. We have a responsibility, a duty to use those in the most effective way. And if we hire somebody that does a crappy job, we are letting the animals down. It's as simple as that. I always
mm,
say that the absolute minimum baseline is any money that we spend on like hiring staff or paying contractors needs to be at least more effective than just giving it to a vegan sanctuary, at least. And it's
mm,
sometimes it can be hard to measure impact despite all the work that we do. But if you aren't like clearly delivering
mm,
amazing like results for what you're doing, then
mm,
it's not a very effective use of those funds. So basically, volunteer with organizations, whether that's We the Free or a different organization. Join the join a media team or volunteer at doing like organizing, or find a way to get involved, volunteer, and demonstrate your worth. And you'll probably find that if you're good enough, you've got the
mm,
best chance of being offered a job. And also let people know that you want to work in animal rights. You want to dedicate yourself to this. Show your passion. Show how
yeah.
committed and dedicated, enthusiastic you are, and also be good at what you do. Invest in developing your skills and be the best version of yourself.
Yes, yes. And I'll just like to add one more point to it, because this is something I decided in my head in around 2020, that this is the career that I want to pursue. But one of the reasons why I did not pursue full time that time also, and even when I got the offer from VeganFTA, I did not pursue it that time, because uh, I was in the senior management in the corporate, and I was making decent money. And from my end, I also ensured that I have to create enough surplus for me, so that tomorrow if something doesn't work out, i have uh, the I have the bandwidth to continue even if there is no earning for a substantial period of time. So even before I joined the movement full time, if I have to put it that way, I was still working in the background to make myself practically available for the movement. So this is something, when people reach out to me, I always tell them, hey, at the very least, try to first and foremost cut down on your unnecessary spending, and try to create a run like a bandwidth for 6 months of your expenses at the very least, right? Because like you said, even today all organizations, they are we are not like a sustainable organization, in the sense that there is no product that we are selling and operationally we are profitable or something like that, right? We are dependent on individuals and other organizations and donors who are helping the movement. So, and there's like, we live in a dynamic world, you don't know what can happen, so one needs to be prepared from their end as well. So there's that preparation which can also start to happen even before one joins the movement full time.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something that I was going to say earlier, but kind of forgot. Is this concept of it actually comes from the world of effective altruism, which I'm not really big into effective altruism because I feel like, well, for anyone that doesn't know what effective altruism is, it's basically it's probably kind of self-explanatory from the name. Altruism just means doing good in the world. Effective means like obviously being as like effective as we can to do the most good. So it's using our resources in the most efficient way to create the biggest positive impact on the planet. And most people that go into the world of effective altruism eventually end up at animal rights because it's just such a big problem that even if you come into this world of like effective altruism, wanting to just improve the world, the scale of what happens to animals is so big. It's such a tractable problem, meaning you can do something about it, and it's a very neglected problem. There's not enough people working on like animal rights that you end up finding yourself to like either maybe initially animal welfare and later animal rights. So again, I'm not really big into effective altruism. I like some of the kind of fundamental concepts of like trying to be as effective as possible with our resources. But they used to really heavily promote this idea called earning to give. And basically, earning to give, it just means if you can like work in an extremely high paid job, it might be way more effective for you to do that and donate your money to really effective animal charities than actually you working in the space yourself. If you are a tech consultant earning like $600,000 a year, like you would have to be an extremely prolific activist to be more impactful as a full-time activist earning like a living allowance of like $30,000 a year than just giving that $600,000 or like all of your disposable from that to a really impactful animal rights charity. Um, so maybe the biggest thing you can do for the movement is to play capitalism, get filthy rich, and donate that money to the movement. But it doesn't have to be that all the way, right? You could freelance, especially if you're working in like tech or something like that, where you can work remotely. Move to move somewhere that's extremely low cost of living, off the grid, have quite a humble life, work your butt off, do animal rights content or animal rights investigations or animal rights outreach every spare minute of the time you've got, and then like work freelancing on the side to earn a good living salary.
Hmm.
That's an option as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, yes. And that's very well put, that if your income potential is really high, and in that case, you will have to be a better contributor to the movement to work in the movement full time. That's a really nice take, actually.
I'm glad that made sense out loud because it made sense in my head, but I think it's the first time I've ever said that out loud.
Yeah, yeah. All right, James. So before I proceed, I just wanted to show you something, and I want you to break this down for us. So, because we talked about street activism a lot, so this is just one
Mhm.
very common example, and I'm sure that you would have heard this either online or seen someone say something, or or a very close iteration of this in real life as well, right? So I'll just read it out for
Mhm.
people who are just listening. So a non-vegan trawler says, "What is the purpose of chicken? They are meant to be eaten." And the activist responds, "That is like saying, what is the purpose of a black person? They are meant to be slaves." So this is a very realistic conversation, James, and I want you to break this down: the pros, the cons, the opportunities. What do you think?
Interesting. I think what's missing here is, I mean, what we have there is the words that the person says, but actually 93% of our communication is not the words we say. It's our body language. It's how we enunciate the words. It's, am I screaming it at them, or am I like laughing and using the kind of tension to diffuse the humor and show how ludicrous their position is? If I'm like, oh, come on, man, you can't believe that. Like, if I was to say, like, oh, well, what's the purpose of black people? Like that, I'm not even going to say that because I don't want someone to clip it and say that that's my words there. But you know what I mean? Like, if I'm saying that with like humor and like using it to diffuse the fact that they're clearly saying something ludicrous and like kind of diffuses tension and hold a mirror up to them and show them how ridiculous they are. That's very different from me saying that completely like stone faced to them. So that's an immediate thing.
Hmm.
I guess Hmm. I don't know. I think it really comes down to how you say it. I don't know.
Hmm.
What do you think, Shivam?
I think the same as well. And when I have written this here, I've written in the tone of the stone faced, very, very stoic kind of delivery. And I think I completely agree with you. Personally, I would add a few questions in between as well before I actually say it. That is like saying, because I'm kind of making it sound that the other person is saying this. I would rather question the other person and say, but in like, what do you think if someone in the past would have, who was an outright racist, who a decent person like you would hate, and if they would have said something very similar to this. And
Hmm.
what I'm at this stage, I'm not trying to compare the victims, but rather the oppressor's mindset. So what do you have to say about that? So maybe framing it, of course, the emotional tone comes into picture as well, which you talked about, but also, um, instead of making the statement, putting it out as a question for the other person to think.
Oh
Essentially,
yeah, 100%,
yeah,
hundred
essentially
percent.
trying to trick the other person into thinking that it is their thought, not mine.
Yeah, so this is something that we teach in the Inspiring Behavior Change workshop that we do, which asking questions is the most powerful tool. So we teach a coaching approach towards vegan advocacy. And the problem with what we've got here, the biggest problem, um, apart from what I've already mentioned, is that we don't have like how it's being said. But the biggest problem with exactly what is being said there is it's a statement. And that's not problematic in itself, but it's not the most effective way to have this conversation. Asking questions is the most powerful tool in our arsenal as vegan coaches. There's something called the self-generation effect. So, social science and psychology has found that when people generate an idea themselves, they are far more
Yeah.
likely to believe it. We always phrase this in the We the Free training as people believe what they say, not what they hear. So if I can ask this troll the right questions and they can tell me themselves, like, no, obviously, like obviously chickens have a unique lived experience. They have a life that's their own. They have friends and they have family, and to them their purpose is greater than that. If I can ask them the right questions and they tell me that, that's way more powerful. So maybe I could start with like trying to draw out that comparison themselves. Like, can you think about a time in the past, in history,
Mm,
where a group of oppressed people have been dehumanized and told that their only purpose was to serve others, and that we
mm,
now in the future we now see that as wrong?
mm.
That just by
Yeah.
phrasing that as a question, I'm saying, well, yeah, I guess like in the past, like
Mm,
slavery, everybody said that that was just their purpose to like serve, but now we of
mm.
course know that that was like really effed up and wrong. Like just
Yeah.
by phrasing it as a question, it becomes a lot more powerful. So that's
Yeah.
like how you say it, like your actual, like your enunciation, your how you phrase it, your rhythm, everything is important. But also, like, if you can ask questions rather than make statements, that's nearly always more powerful.
Yes. And there's another point that I would like to add here, that in this conversation, James and I, we are assuming that the activist is trying to effect a change with the person that he or she is talking to. Sometimes, especially in the content creation game, when we ask and then we arrive at at a meaningful conversation, from content perspective, that doesn't do as well as if you say something controversial. Is that good? Is that bad? I'm not commenting on that, but I'm saying that if it is planned that you will be aggressive, you will be rude, and you are capturing it to gain attention, and then you have some strategic viewpoint that with that attention you will channelize it, um, to get better outcomes, then that can also be one thing, right? But then of course in that
Yeah.
situation you're not, um, uh, like, your target audience is not the person you're talking to. Your target audience becomes completely someone else.
Yeah. So when we are teaching people to have these coaching conversations, to ask questions, these conversations tend to be way more impactful, way more likely that this person will take steps towards veganism or even fully embrace veganism.
Hmm.
And that's great. But they don't necessarily make for the most interesting content. I have like recordings of really amazing conversations and
mm,
they last for like 30 minutes, and they're quite dull at times, and we just don't do anything with it because it's not the most engaging content of social media.
mm,
But you have to think what your aim is. So when we
mm,
teach people to have these coaching conversations, we teach them to have those as opposed to what would be a more default conversational framework, which tends to be more of a debate. So it's, by a debate, I mean it's a backwards and forwards conversational format where maybe I put forward an argument and they then kind of knock it back to me. They either accept or refute my claim. Maybe they send their own argument my way, and it's kind of like a conversational tennis, or in the form of a debate, more like a conversational knife fight. But that if your the aim of your conversation is to inspire this person to go vegan, the best thing that you can do is avoid that debate, because when people enter into a debate, studies have shown that when people enter into a debate, they are likely to leave that conversation even more convinced of their original viewpoint. So if they go
mm,
into that debate with anti-vegan sentiment, or the sentiment that animals have the purpose of being eaten, if they
mm,
defend that viewpoint against you in a 20-minute like argument in the street, they are likely to leave that conversation even more convinced of their original viewpoint, because they've just
mm,
defended it in a conversation for 20 minutes. So if your
mm,
aim is for them to go vegan, you need to
mm.
adopt a more coaching approach. Of course,
Okay.
there's no like, it's not like this is 100% the impact. I'm talking percentages. I'm talking the most likely, and
Mm,
most likely approach you can take to be the most effective is more of a coaching approach.
mm,
But if you have an audience, and if
mm.
there are real world consequences for that conversation, then maybe you should take more of a debate approach. Maybe you should intellectually humiliate them, make them look like a fool, make them look like an idiot, and put that on social
Yeah,
media for 50,000 people to say. Great.
yeah,
One more example I could give of a real world impact for these conversations. Joey Carbstrong recently, well, I say recently, I think it was like last year or something, he
mm,
took part in a debate for, was it Oxford or Cambridge, one of the big universities in the UK?
yeah,
And the motion was like, the house will go vegan. And I'm assuming that means like all the procurement, all the products that they buy, that they serve in their canteens, whatever, the house will become a vegan house, was what they were debating. And
mm,
he didn't go into that with like a coaching approach. He had an audience, he had to make a point, it had to be convincing. And when he made that point, he intellectually humiliated, was it Katie Hopkins? She looked like such a fool on that debate. But as a
yeah.
result of that, like the motion passed, they were successful, and that had a real world consequence that would have helped animals. So yeah, I guess the breakdown is: are you trying to make this one person go vegan, or do you have an audience, or are there real world consequences? Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. So just to summarize, so if you're talking to a neutral person on street and you want that person to go vegan, then of course go for the coaching approach where you are using a lot of emotional intelligence as well into your communication. But let's say you are invited to a Piers Morgan show. Over there, you are supposed to intellectually humiliate the person because we know
I think
that
so.
person will. Cool.
Well, the
Awesome.
thing about debates is like the person that you're debating
Mm,
probably can't be convinced. They're probably not going to say, you know what, you're right, I'm an animal abuser, I'm going to change that. But the audience quite often can be convinced. So if you have an audience, so
yes.
if you're at a We the Free 3 minute movie challenge, chances are
Mm,
you're having a one on one conversation, or a conversation with like 2 to 3 people max at a time, and you can take a more coaching approach. But if you have a big group, like 10 guys come over and start trolling, and one of them's like throwing chicken nuggets at you or something, like
yeah.
for me personally, obviously keep yourself safe. But for me personally, I'm going to think, right, who's like the biggest, noisiest dude in this crowd? I'm going to talk to him, have a bit of like banter, make him look like a bit of a fool, and like I'm going to like one-on-one conversation with him while all the other guys around like listen to it, and I'm going to try and convince them by defeating this dude. You know,
Yeah,
does that make
and
sense?
also, and
Oh,
that makes sense. And also make sure that if you're having such a conversation, please record that conversation. Yeah,
yeah,
the
yeah.
the
Please,
impact will be 10x more. I have another
yes,
example here.
please record. conversation. What one more example would be, maybe if that's your intention, like set up like a debate table with a sign on the front that says "We should all go vegan, change my mind" or something like that.
Yeah.
Like some people have had success with those, doing like really provocative conversations, reach a lot of people, and the conversations in the comment section can be really quite surprisingly good. So that's an option as
Okay.
well.
There's another example on screen now, very similar to last one as well. A non-vegan says, "I can become a vegetarian but not vegan. I can't quit dairy." And the activist responds by saying, "Then you should, then you would be contributing to." So, what do you have to say about such confrontations?
So first of all, like I do have a strong opinion on this, that
Mm,
what happens to cows in the dairy industry is rape. And
mm,
apologies for using that word. Maybe I should have added a trigger warning for anyone listening. But what happens to dairy cows in the industry is unforgivable. It's an act of sexual violence. It's horrible. And those dairy cows need justice. It's wrong. And we owe it to them to be as effective as we can. And if you could convince me that using the word rape and making that comparison is effective and will bring justice to those cows, then I'd say go for it. Unfortunately, what I found through many conversations and like experimenting with like uh, directly addressing that comparison is quite often as soon as I use the R word, that conversation goes out of the window. The whole conversation shifts and they say, whoa, are you saying that humans are exactly the same as cows? And I'm like, well, no, that's not. And then they start shouting and the conversation goes out the window. So what
mm,
I found to be much more effective is getting them to say it. And I use a tool called speaking in definitions. So while I won't use the R word, I will accurately describe what happens to cows in the dairy industry. And I'll say, I don't want to say it all now because obviously preaching to the converted, the vegan audience probably listening to this, but I will accurately describe that what happens to dairy cows, they are restrained and forcefully impregnated against their will. They are tied up in maybe mechanically restrained or tied up,
mm,
and they have bull semen injected into their vaginas, and it makes them pregnant, forcefully impregnated against their will. And maybe I'll even be more graphic and describe what I've seen and told stories I've seen from when I've been on farms and I've seen this happening. And honestly, what happens quite often is they say, "Holy shit, that sounds like rape," and they use the word, and all of a sudden, it's not a confrontation. It's not throwing the conversation out. It's even more powerful than it would have been if I've used the word. So I
mm,
recommend to people when you're talking about these very emotionally charged words, try
mm,
speaking in definition instead, or just ask them questions to guide them to come to that conclusion on their own because it's more powerful. Even though it's
mm,
accurate to use this word, it's not
mm.
necessarily effective. So I want you to, as an activist, I want you to think about this concept of being right versus being effective. You are right to use that word, but it might not be being effective. So just consider that and balance it up. And
I think you summed it up well. Being right versus being effective, and not necessarily that both have to be mutually exclusive. So when we talk about being effective, it's essentially the art of using what emotions when matters a lot. I mean, one can use the word as well, depending on how far into the conversation they are, what type of rapport they have already built, and
yeah.
uh, how the other person is already absorbing the pointers that you have made, and then you can arrive at that. Otherwise, I think what you said made so much sense. Speaking in definition, while you're not using the word, you are describing it for them to arrive at it. Or even if they are not arriving at it,
Hmm.
again, we can ask them questions like, what would you call this if this were to happen to a human, right? So yeah, I mean, emotional intelligence as a skill set is so damn important when it comes to conversations like this. Otherwise, it's very sometimes it's difficult for activists to
Hmm.
channelize their passion, right? So that's where working on your communication skill is so important. And when communication skill is not about the use of language and vocabulary, but rather how you are navigating conversations. And specifically the two examples that I kept here, they are both in a way comparing sufferings of animals to humans, right? And to do that, in my opinion, like I have like some of my close activist friends, what we do is we always practice it, and in fact we record our practices and then we analyze it, that maybe I
Oh
should have
my
not.
God, yeah, please. That's
Yeah,
amazing. I love that you
yeah,
guys role play.
yeah. So we do that, and then we look at it, and then we say, at this stage I should have not spoken this, I should have waited for this person to get further into the conversation and then use this word, or maybe paused here, not rushed into this. So those kind of stuff is like very important, and that can only come from willful learning, right? It just can't happen by passive learning, so one has to
I
invest in
agree
that.
so much, Shivam. I really I resonate so strongly with what you've just said, and this is something that is very important to me, both personally and like as we the free, is constantly carrying this student mentality with us wherever we go, and
Mm,
being willing to learn and improve. And I do this every time I go to a street outreach event. If I'm having conversations with people, then I have like a lapel microphone that I just like clip it under my beard or on my shirt. Not always visible. Like sometimes, if I'm not recording content, if I don't have a camera person there or something, I'll just have my iPhone in my pocket set to record, and I'll record every conversation I have. And then if
mm,
I'm on a train home later or on an aeroplane or uh, whatever, if I've got some spare time, I'll put my AirPods in, sit and listen to those conversations back and critique them. And don't be afraid to sit and listen to your old conversations, even if it's a bit cringe. I know your voice sounds a little bit different when you listen back to it on a recording, and it's a bit more nasal or whatever. At least it is for me. But don't be afraid to listen back to your old recordings and critique it. And what you
yeah,
will find is it does help you to hone your craft. You will improve, or even better, find a friend where you can switch and like kind of be coaches to each other. Or the ideal scenario is what Shivam just mentioned. There is, yeah, get together a group of people, like do the outreach role play, take turns being the vegan, being the pre-vegan, and switch it up with different kinds of things you say, practice it, and improve your
yeah.
craft.
Be an anti-vegan as well. Well, when you role play, like let the other person push as much as one can, and so that you become better at crafting it. I had this question earlier, but I think we have already discussed this, but I'll still summarize it. So I wanted three simple, easy to implement tips for street activism. One thing you have already mentioned, that if you want to use harsh terms, maybe not use the term directly, but speak in definition. Second thing, self generation. So that is so important, that instead of you telling the person, you frame your pointers and questions in such a way that the other person thinks that they have generated this idea. And the last point is this willful learning, right, where you are recording your conversations or being making notes of your conversation in whichever way possible, so that you know what you have done wrong and what are your opportunities to improve.
I'd probably put that one at number four, and the number three that I'd pick that
Mm,
I've not already mentioned would be
mm,
to develop your storytelling skills. I genuinely mean this is a skill that anybody can learn, and this is something that I'm still trying to work on myself to develop my storytelling skills. Storytelling is an incredibly important skill in terms of how to be persuasive, how to get people to care what you're talking about, how to convey strong emotions. And the example that came up with like what happens to dairy cows in the dairy industry, obviously I can ask people really powerful questions to get them to come to that conclusion themselves. What one thing I can also do is to tell a really powerful story that takes people through those emotions and they realize how they feel about it themselves. I could tell them about a time when I went into a farm with a camera to do some filming, and I asked the farmers, can I film what's happening? And they said, yeah, sure. They didn't see anything wrong with it. And what I saw them doing to this dairy cow just absolutely ruined me. And I still think about this at night sometimes when I can't sleep. And I think about the look of fear in this cow's eyes. And she was looking so, she just wanted to get away. And I could tell that she felt like she was being violated in that moment. Like if you can tell a story around like your experiences, whether it's doing an investigation or just something that you've seen or a connection that you had when maybe you used to be a vegetarian and you thought that, and then you came across this piece of knowledge and it completely changed how you feel about it. And like, what about if you saw that same thing? How would you feel about that? This is an incredibly powerful skill that I think the movement underutilizes at the moment.
yes. It's a part of effective communication, and it's going to help big time with content creation as well, if you hone the craft of storytelling. And in fact, I'll just share one thing with you. In my earlier days of activism, when I used to talk about the life of hens in India, we have open slaughterhouse, right? Unlike the West, so you can see them sitting in cages and stuff like that. So I wanted to share the experience of the hens the with the people I used to talk to. And in the beginning, it never came out in the way that I wanted it to. It didn't sound sincere, so I had to practice it a few times in my head, especially this one line which now I always talk about this, that their friends and family members are killed right in front of them. I I could never say this with enough conviction, and then I realized this after I saw some of my conversation, that why am I hesitating? This is what is the reality. So it's just that even after becoming a vegan, I probably still at a certain distance from these animals' experiences, that I'm still hesitating to say it with full conviction. So I
Mhm.
practice that with so much of emotion, and now I say it, and because I do not doubt that when people listen to it, even they are in that zone, that yes, what he's speaking makes sense, that of course we see them every day, but that doesn't invalidate their experience, this specific experience of their friends and family members being snatched out of the cage in front of them. So that is an example of honing your storytelling skills, right? Because we have seen so much, either in real life, through documentaries, even some really powerful moments in our life which made us think and reflect and change and so on and so forth. But have we documented them in a way where we can convey it to someone else with as much emotion and as much impact as it has on us? So I think that's a very valid tip.
Yeah, 100%. And I think just this idea that um, any skill that we want is something that we can develop. Going back to that student mentality is
Mm.
important. People have said to me in the past, like, "Oh my God, James, you're really talented at outreach. I wish I could do what you can do." When they've heard me having an outreach conversation, and I've said, "You're joking, right? This is not talent. This is not something I was born with. Like, I've worked really hard to do this, and actually, I'm super introverted, and I really hate talking to strangers, and I've had to like work hard to overcome this." And like
Yeah.
after every outreach event, after every training I do, I sit in a dark room and decompress for an hour afterwards because that's really hard for me. And
Yeah.
I would say it's the same with everything, whether it's storytelling, whether it's video editing. Like you can develop those skills if you're willing to work hard, if you have the conviction, if you have the determination to help animals, then you're willing to dedicate a few hours, a few weeks, a few months, even a few years into becoming like one of the best in the world at what you do, and that skill
Mm.
will help animals.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, deliberate learning is any which way such an important thing, such an important mindset or attitude that one should have, more so within the animal rights movement, right? And James, there's one thing I discussed with you last time we met, and we were discussing about how to tackle people who are religious extremes during street outreach. And you mentioned something that time, and it's something which I have embraced in my activism, in my style. Would you like to talk about how to handle these people?
Oh wow, yeah. So I've actually got a couple of different ways that I like to talk about like religious arguments.
Yeah.
So one of them is to just actually address it using the full like framework that we teach in the Inspiring Behavior Change workshop. So a quick shout out to that. Like go to activism.wtf and sign up for our mailing list and attend our upcoming trainings. It will definitely help you. But first of all, what I like to do is I hear what they've said and I say, if I understand you correctly, it really bothers you what happens to these animals. You really, you mentioned that the person that was attacking the pigs on that footage, that you wanted to hurt them. It really bothered you, but your concern is, and I'll reiterate what they've said to me in a different way, just to make sure I'm understanding them correctly, and then I'll say, tell me, what are some of the guiding principles and values of your faith? If I'm talking to a Muslim, if I'm talking to someone that's Hindu, whatever, what are the guiding principles of your faith? And actually, the guiding values, the guiding principles of every faith is pretty similar. They're about like justice, peace, compassion, kindness, respect. They're kind of the same values. They're very, very aligned with veganism. And then and that's just really good information to know if they share any of these values. And then I'll say, if I want to join your faith, if I want to be Muslim, if I
Yeah.
want to be Hindu, am I allowed to do that? Am I permitted to do that as a vegan? Because I'm vegan and this is really important to me. And I cannot give up on that. I cannot pay for an animal to be killed. I cannot support that violence against animals. It goes against every fiber of my being. Would I be permitted to join your faith as a vegan? And I've asked this question to probably 50 or 60 people of different faiths in the past like 3 years, because I live in Indonesia. I have conversations with a bunch of religious people here. And only one person's ever said, no, you cannot be Muslim if you're vegan because you have to do this. And even that person, we managed to get past it eventually. But they almost always say, well, yes, you could. You'd have to talk to the priest. You'd have to talk to the imam. You'd have to talk to a shaman or whatever. You have to talk to someone and find out, like, what sacrifice do you have to make? Like, what different offerings do you make instead of this? How do you switch this up to live life as a vegan, but still be a good Muslim, still be a good Hindu, still be a good Christian? Um, so then if they say, like, yes, you can do it, of course I can say, okay, could you?
Yeah, this is the point actually I was referring to. This is the same thing. We were having this discussion and you pitched in this point. And ever since I have been using this in different variations. But yeah, this is such a powerful thing because everyone will all more often than not, even like I've talked to close to 50 people ever since our last discussion on these lines, and almost everyone says that yes, you can be a good Muslim while being a vegan, and then that's the moment, right? Then why don't you do that?
Yeah. The other thing that I always like to add to that is that I, I want to be careful what I say now, that it doesn't seem like I'm disrespecting anybody's faith. I
Hmm.
promise that's not the case. But what I find is that because in some faiths it teaches us that it's permissible to use animal products, for instance.
Hmm.
Um, People never really even get to the point of thinking about, of deeply considering whether or not they want to be vegan. They never even get that far. The religious defense almost becomes like a force field that stops people from ever getting to the point of considering whether or not they can be vegan or they want to be vegan.
Hmm.
So sometimes I just like to remove that from the equation. And if I get the feeling when I'm talking to somebody that, again, it's not really that because they're Muslim they can't be vegan. It's that they view veganism as like an inconvenience. If I'm
Hmm.
getting that feeling that they view veganism as a negative, a sacrifice, something they don't want to do, and they're just using the religious argument as like a deflection, then I'll say, okay, so let's just like put a pin in that for a second and put that to one side. Like, your religion says it's permissible. Okay, let's put that to one side. I'm not going to debunk that for right now. Is, if you were to go vegan today, is there anything else that would be hard for you? And what I tend to find is people are most likely, they'll come to me with something else that's on their mind, like, well, actually, I tried this vegan burger once and it wasn't very nice, or they
Hmm.
have these Beyond Meat patties in Tesco and they're like £10 for two. They're kind of expensive, or like they view veganism as expensive, as unhealthy. They won't get enough
Hmm.
protein. Like, what I call the more like genuine fears about veganism, rather than they're not worried about being a good Muslim. But well, I mean they are, but that's not the reason why they won't go vegan.
Yeah.
Does that make
that,
sense? So
yeah,
yeah,
that's
maybe
no,
go on.
that's a very interesting point in general as well. That sometime a person can say X, but then X is not the real reason. And I think as an activist, it's something that we have to figure out what their real reason is. So someone can say, I tried vegan food, but it did not work out. Then the conversation can go in multiple direction, one of them being that the activist is then talking to them, okay, why that food didn't work out for you, did you use this spice instead of this spice, and so on and so forth, and then that discussion is all about preparing the particular meal or whatever, right? But is it their genuine concern? Then like we can always ask them this question, okay, let's assume that you get the perfect food with the taste, the protein, whatever your markers are, then will you go vegan? Or rather, then do you think it's a moral obligation for you to not to exploit animals, right? Because then
Mm.
you are keeping aside what they are using as an excuse and going to the root of what their problem is. So sometimes that nuance is also very important.
Yeah, it's kind of common to. I think in sales, I'm not a salesman, but in sales they call this like getting lost in the weeds. It's like kind of
Yeah,
dealing with all the minutiae of details rather than addressing the elephant in the room,
yeah,
that they don't want to go vegan. So
yeah,
quite often a tool that we can use is to kind of like, okay, let's put that to one side for right now. Is there anything else?
yeah,
So a really common one, apart from like religion, is the most common by far, but probably the second most common in my experience is, oh, I know somebody that tried to go vegan and they almost died, or they had these health concerns. Like, if
mm,
I don't want to make like sweeping generalizations, but if somebody says this to you, there's a really good chance they're just full of shit and they're lying. Like,
yeah,
the reason I know this is every time somebody says this to me now, I make a point to be like, huh, that's really interesting. Obviously, I want to make sure I don't get really sick as a vegan. Like, can I get in contact with this person? Can you share their contact details so I can ask them what they did wrong? And
mm,
every single time there's some reason why this person's no longer in touch. It's, oh, we've lost contact with this person. Oh no, I don't have their number anymore. Like, there's always a reason. And that's because
yeah,
actually they view veganism as an inconvenience, something they
yeah,
don't want to do. They found
yeah,
themselves at a fork in the road where the only option is to either go vegan, which they view as really inconvenient, or be a bad person. And they don't like either
yeah,
of those options. So they
yeah,
make up a third option, which is,
yeah,
I once saw this news article like 2 years ago about this vegan that like died of deficiency. I
yeah.
know, I'll use that as a defense. So they
Yes.
just make something up, and that's like a really easy thing for people to grab because they've seen it in the Daily Mail or whatever,
Yeah,
on
yeah,
BuzzFeed somewhere. So yeah, let's put that to one side and say, okay, I'm gonna connect you with some like nutritionists and this mentor program that can help you make sure that you don't have any of those issues. Is there
mm,
anything else? Any other challenges? Are you worried that like maybe there'd be like social pressure? Maybe you're worried you wouldn't enjoy your food anymore. Maybe you're worried it's expensive. Like, is there anything else going on? And I want to
mm,
talk about that. I want to get to the. If I could give one piece of advice to get to the heart of the problem, and it's to ask this one question, and we teach this in the IBC, the Inspiring Behavior Change workshop that we teach. The last question in the framework is: if you were to go vegan today, what would be the hardest thing? And I
mm,
promise that in the thousands of conversations where I've asked people this, nobody has ever told me, you know what, I'm worried that I might one day end up shipwrecked on a desert island, just me and a pig, and I might have to kill that pig to survive. Like, nobody has that concern about being shipwrecked on an island. Nobody's worried that when they're slicing their carrots, they'll hear the carrots scream and they'll think that this plant feels pain. Like, that's not the real reason why they're not vegan. That's a deflection. So I mean, said, like,
yeah,
what would be the hardest thing for you to go vegan right now? And you're probably going to get a genuine concern that social pressure, expensive, health,
yeah,
cost, taste, whatever.
yeah. And James, all of these pointers that you mentioned, they are all to do with how to go vegan, right? And before that, do you also check whether the person is convinced on why to go vegan? That okay, or could this be a person who says, "No, I don't have any issues with animal exploitation."
No, this is so. All of our training framework is built on the idea that most people already have vegan values and
Mm,
maybe their actions aren't aligned with those. So, what I mean by that is most people don't like to see animals being mutilated, tortured,
mm,
chopped up into little pieces, and turned into animal products. Most people, they maybe they like the end product, but they don't like the act of the violence of creating those products. Most people generally agree that most people have those vegan values and their actions aren't aligned with them. If I'm talking to someone that's a complete like psychopath, as in like literally they'd be in the DSM-5 and they've got like a medical condition, this is obviously not going to work. Almost like, but for most people that have like some level of basic level of empathy, they find it unpleasant what happens to animals, and maybe they view it as a necessary evil. And through our conversation, through the video, we can show them that this is not actually necessary. It's possible to be vegan. And with any necessary evil, if you can remove the necessary part of that, then what's left? It's just an evil act, right? So, kind of the first part of the training workshop, and it's really hard for me to summarize it because it's an hour of a workshop that I'm trying to condense into one sentence. But it's asking people a set of 15 questions that takes them through seeing what happens to animals, drawing out those vegan values, so asking them how do they feel about it, what is it specifically that makes you feel this way, like how do you think the animals feel, like empathizing with the animals, remembering specifically what thoughts they say, then going into like, well, why is this a problem? Like, if I speak to a lot of people always tell me that this is wrong, that this makes them feel like upset. What happens to these animals? But like, why does it happen? Oh, it happens because we pay for it to happen. Do we have to pay for it to happen? Well, no, I guess we could go vegan. Like, if we ask people the right questions and take them on that journey of like coming to the vegan conclusion, then dealing with any obstacles that they come later is much easier. So yeah, I wouldn't even start on dealing with would you get enough how will you get enough protein, and how will you budget as a vegan, and how will you make sure that your food tastes delicious. I won't even get onto those problems until I've addressed the fact that this happens because we pay for it and we don't have to. We could be vegan. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then an argument which is otherwise very silly, but I just want your opinion on this. That like the plants feel pain thing, right? And there are some people who troll. Let's not talk about them, but then there are people who are like genuine in their head. They feel okay. The repercussion of eating an animal and plant is the same. Then what do you do? What do you do with those people?
So I used to have like very long, like backwards and forwards, being like, well, they don't have a central nervous system, and they don't, maybe it's a stimulus and reaction. It's like more of like an off and on switch than genuine sentience. Go on.
Be- Before you answer, because the reason I'm asking you this is because I get a very strong feeling that now you don't talk about sentience and CNS. That's why I'm probably asking you this question. So I'm intrigued what your answer is going to be.
Yeah, so I used to have those very long conversations with people about backwards and forwards, like, oh, they don't have central nervous systems and stimulus and response and things like that. But what I found is since adopting a coaching based approach to my vegan outreach conversations, I waste a lot less time on those things. And like I just asked that question, like, what would be the hardest thing for you to go vegan? Like, nobody's ever answered that they're worried that plants feel pain. And if somebody genuinely believes that,
Yeah.
then the best thing I can do is connect them with some like scientific literature. But like even if they're saying they genuinely believe that plants feel pain in exactly the same way as animals do, if obviously I could waste time, I could spend time saying like if you're driving down the road and a dog runs out in front of your car, like would you like swerve across a garden to save that dog?
Hmm.
Like of course you would. But actually there's like that grass you've just swerved across, that's plant life, and that's like way more plants than like one animal. So why did you do that? And the answer is because you know in your heart that slicing a pig in the neck is not the same as like slicing a carrot, as
Hmm.
cutting some broccoli, as chopping some kale. You know in your heart that like stabbing a human being is different from like slicing some kale, and you know in
Hmm.
your heart it's the same for a pig.
Hmm.
So I would just like leave it at that and then say,
Yeah.
okay, let's assume that you make peace with that. Like, if you were to go vegan, what would be the hardest thing? Because most of
Hmm.
the time when people, so this is the thing, most of the time when people are talking about plant sentience,
Hmm.
that's a huge red flag for me that I've fallen into a debate and that they
Hmm.
find themselves trapped into a corner defending a position that's untenable. And
Hmm.
they're reaching for like what I call like intellectually dishonest arguments because they feel
Hmm.
backed into a corner, they're losing the debate, they'll grab for anything. People know in their heart that it's not the same, but
Hmm.
they present this argument anyway because
Hmm.
they're in a debate and they don't want to lose that debate at all costs. So instead of debating them, I want to bring it back to collaboration. And I'll say,
Hmm.
you told me earlier that what was happening to these animals absolutely
Hmm.
broke your heart and you wanted to help them. Like the best way
Hmm.
you can help these is by going vegan. And you know in your heart that. So let's talk about if you were to go vegan, what would that be? Like,
Hmm.
let's talk together about how it can help these animals rather than debating about plant sentience, which I don't believe that you believe.
Hmm. Interesting.
And
Yeah.
maybe I need to use a little bit of humor to diffuse that. Like,
Hmm.
maybe I need to be like direct to them. And like, if I built up enough rapport to say, come on, man, you don't believe that, like, then
Hmm.
great. But maybe I don't. Maybe I need to use a bit of emotional intelligence and like understand
Hmm.
how they're feeling. And these are skills that we have to develop. But for me, I say the number one thing you can do in these situations is ask questions and coach them towards the answer. If you're spending time debating plant sentience and desert island scenarios, that's probably a red flag that you've fallen into a debate,
Yeah.
and you need to bring
Yeah.
it
I
back
think.
to the animals.
Yeah.
Remind
Yeah.
them how they felt about the animals, remind them the values that they have, and get back to solutions.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's important to realize that if the other person is being intellectually dishonest, then there's a decision to be made on our part whether we want to pursue this or not, and if we want to pursue this, then how we tackle it. I wanted to check with you, James, that for an independent activist, if they think about creating an organization, then why should they think about registering an organization? And if they decide to do so, then what can they do to raise funds?
Yeah. So, first of all, I mentioned earlier, like trying to find the intersection of like whatever you're good at, whatever there is a gap in the movement, and what you're passionate about. Like, try to find that intersection and do that. And if there's not already an organization doing that that you think is effective, that is trustworthy, that is transparent, that is doing all the right things, then start an organization. Also, you need people to be able to, you need to convince people to believe in that organization. You need to be able to raise funds for it. I think, in terms of how to raise funds for a new organization, it's really, really hard. The number one thing I would say is there's not enough funding in the movement compared to, if you look at how much money is given to charity annually, like 99% of it goes to like human rights issues. And of the 1% that goes to animal issues, about 99% of that goes to like cats and dogs and like pet or animal companion charities. And the only 1% goes to like farmed animals. Um, so it really is like 1% of the 1% of like charitable money that's given. And that's not a lot of money. It's a few $100 million a year, which sounds like a lot, but as soon as you talk about some of those big like welfare corporations with hundreds of staff and big pensions and directors and CEOs earning a bunch of money, like there's not that much left for the grassroots. So basically, I don't have the easy answer. This is not something I've mastered myself. Like, We the Free is constantly fundraising for the next year, every time applying for grants. There are a few big organizations out there that anybody can apply to, like Vegan Grants, and I'm struggling to think of the other one off the top of my head. But if you go on Hive, um, is yeah, if you go on Hive, they're an animal rights, like they used to be called Impactful Animal Advocacy. They have a Slack channel. Search on Hive, and they have a section on there about how to fundraise, and how even help on like how to start new organizations. That those resources on there are incredibly good. I would recommend them to people, and they've even got like grants that people can apply for and things like that. So if you want to start a new organization, definitely do it. Definitely ask for help from people that have already done it on how to write pitches, funding proposals, grant applications, things like that. And most importantly, be prepared to have to justify your theory of change and how the work that you do will contribute to a vegan world. You need other people to believe in your project as much as you do. And it's not, whatever you're working on, that's your baby. That's your project of passion. It's not other people. So for you to help them believe in it, you need to be able to justify it. You need to use a bit of storytelling. You need to be able to demonstrate your effectiveness. For
Yeah.
me, with We the Free, we managed to secure a very small seed grant, which was just enough for us to basically like hire a web developer and buy the domains that we needed and set up our emails and buy some equipment that we needed and pay for the essential things that we absolutely needed to start this organization. And we all volunteered on it for at least the first 6 months, like unpaid, and some of us for like several years. And I quit my job, the I quit my job. Actually, I didn't follow Shivam's advice from earlier on how to be sustainable. I quit my job before, like we'd got long term funding, and I took a gamble. And I had basically had 6 months to make We the Free happen. And at one point, we were like 2 weeks away from running out of money, and We the Free wasn't going to happen. And I was going to have to go and like start applying for jobs again because I didn't have enough money to pay for rent or things like that. So I took a huge gamble, and fortunately, it paid off. But even still, like 5 years in, we're still fundraising for the next year always, because that's just what organizations have to do in a non-profit sector. So it's not a case of you meet the right person and you're sorted forever. I mean, for a few people it might be, but I think that's very, very unlikely.
Hmm.
Does
Yeah,
that answer the question?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not a very optimistic answer, but it does answer the question. So yeah, the road is tough, and of course, I mean, it's a practical answer because we have to also look at the constraint. Like James said, there's only so much of amount that goes into charity, and out of those, very small percentage comes into the grassroots abolitionist activism kind of organization. So yeah, that's
Let me give a slightly more optimistic answer then. A
yeah.
slightly more optimistic answer would be there are some really, really impactful things that you can do without needing hundreds of thousands of dollars of funding. Maybe you are using AI. Maybe you are making really good use of like people that are willing to volunteer on your project. Maybe it's something that you can do in your spare time until it becomes a point where you can find somebody to believe in it. Um, if going back to what I said earlier, finding something that you're passionate about,
Mm,
something that you're good at, where you add value to the movement, and if you do a good enough job, you will inspire other people to support you. And I
mm.
hope that your project is successful.
Yeah, that sounds more optimistic. Thanks for that. And my last question, because we are running out of time. Otherwise, I had more stuff to discuss. But you talked about theory of change, and we are talking about create. I think you and I, we both want to create a vegan world, and hopefully in our lifetime. What are the things which you feel are currently missing, and what is it that we as a movement can do better?
Oh, that's a really big question. Um, I feel like if I had to pick just a couple of like kind of gaps in the movement,
Mm,
um, so it's like better capacity building for organizations that already exist. So what I mean for that is like really good like human resources support for organizations that maybe don't know how to like incorporate as a company, how to set up, how to deal with conflicts,
mm,
how to hire and in worst case scenario fire staff, things like that. There are some organizations doing it, but they're like relatively small organizations without that much resources, and it's not enough support for everyone in the movement. um, that's one thing. Another thing, kind of gap in the movement, I think, is really good mental health support. I know that when I worked in social care in the past, I spent 15 years working in social care with adults with learning disabilities. And the last company I worked for was a really good company that took great care of their staff. And we had something that I think is fairly common in the corporate world called an employee assistance program, which is basically a phone number that I can call and say, I'm having some trouble either at work or in my personal life, and they could connect me with like counseling or coaching or mental health services. They could connect me with like employment advice, careers advice, all sorts of things to like help me to be able to, while I was at work, to focus on my work. And then when I think of the animal rights movement, we are a movement that is incredibly prone to burnout and toxic communication in fighting. It's endemic in our movement. It's an occupational hazard for any activist, is that we see the most horrible stuff. We see the worst of what humans do to animals. We see it when we do our investigations or when we watch the footage or when we're advocating for animals, and that can really mess us up. And then there's really not that much support for activists who are like really struggling. There's a few organizations like in defense of animals that do like an activist support line, and a few organizations I can't think of right now. But I would really love if there was basically like a mental health um, like a resource for activists that anyone can access. They can join a Skype call or WhatsApp call or whatever
mm,
and get access to good mental health support. I think we're really prone to needing it, and there's still a gap there in my experience.
mm, mm. Exactly. I think those are very valuable points, and um, doing away in, like, I don't think at this stage we can even think of doing away with infighting, but it's something we have to accept and navigate. And if only we had good support system for that. And that is something, so that's an opportunity for people who are listening. That's an opportunity for you to build in, um, to make a career in this space, right? All right, James, thank you so much for your time. I still had so many other things to discuss, but we are already at close to a 2 hour mark. Maybe we'll have another round of discussion some other day. But
I would
thank
love
you
to come
so.
back in the future, Shivam.
Yeah. We resonate, and I think it's always a great conversation with you. And I'm so glad and so happy and so thankful that you could spare time to join me today. So thank you so much, James. And to our audience who have watched at least this far, then please check out the important links in the description, where you'll also find the WTF training session link. Please do check that out as well.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Shivam.
Thank you. Bye bye.